I used to have so many friends, especially when you're young. You tend to have all these friends that not all of them are good for you. You should start thinking about that. Am I with people who are good for me, healthy for me? So I think I made a conscious decision. I trimmed down my friends. One of the things I noticed that attract me to certain people is being positive. I have this hype man. If I surround myself with these hype men, if I'm down, if I'm like taking on like a project and I'm worried about it, I can always count on my friends to like tell me, you can do it. You can give me like positive advice and all that. So I look for positivity.
Emerge Stories is a place where, as the name implies, you are going to hear stories. Stories from people all over the Philippines who have come from many different types of backgrounds, and especially people who have gone through struggles, people who have gone through the challenging parts of life. And I hope that these stories will relate for you in some way, that some of these stories will really land for you because these people have gone through probably just about the same thing you might be going through right now. Welcome again to Emerge Stories. Today, our guest on the show is Chrystal Alesna. She is an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, and a single mom from Cebu. And despite becoming a single mom at a very young age, Chrystal has continued to stretch herself, learn new things, put herself into situations where she was really forced to grow as a person. And she just continues to do things on purpose that are uncomfortable so that she can keep growing. And I think she's a really good example that I hope will inspire some people out there. She's also started up some businesses on her own recently, and in the past, she's run agencies. She now has a company that is actually a jewelry business called Island Jewels, and about to start another luxury retail brand in Cebu. And I hope you guys just enjoy this conversation. Chrystal, to me, is just somebody who is really inspiring. So if something in this story does inspire you or is useful for you, that you find valuable, and maybe you know somebody else out there that you think would relate, please do take a moment to share it with them, because it's really meaningful when that happens. When somebody shares a story with you that they think is for you, it can really catch your attention and be a meaningful change in your life. Please take a second and share this with somebody that you think would appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. As always, give us your feedback and let us know what you like or don't like. We would super appreciate it. And let's jump in to the conversation. Chrystal, welcome to Emerge Stories. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. My pleasure.
And you're here in Talisay, Cebu, right?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. I know a little bit about your story because I've known you for a while, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I know you've got some really powerful stuff to share. Let's start out with, what's your life like now? Who is Chrystal today? It's 2023. What are you working on? What's your life look like? What are you proud of?
Yeah, of course, the thing I'm most proud of is being a mother of two amazing kids, but I'm also working on my own jewelry business, and which I've had for it's something I started during the pandemic, but now I'm also starting something exciting. It's another restoration business. I partnered with a friend who I've had since high school. So yeah,
Okay. What kind of restoration?
it's leather restoration, but focused on designer bags like
Nice.
Louis Vuitton. Yeah.
So that will be your second business that you've started by yourself or from the ground up. But you've been an entrepreneur for a while before that, right? Is that right?
Oh yeah. My first business I started, I think when I was 17.
Wow.
It was an SEO business. I dropped out of college because I could no longer afford to continue. And so that was the first one before I then moved on to an advertising agency. That one, I was an employee, but later on, we started to create our own related business, still in healthcare. So
Okay.
this would have been the jewelry business, my third, and the leather restoration would have been my fourth.
Nice. So Chrystal, the single mom and two kids. You have two sons. They're, how old are they now?
Hoping. Let me think. One's turning 16 and one's turning 17.
So if anybody's watching this on YouTube or sees the video and they're looking at you and they're thinking, what? 16 and 17? We won't ask your age, but that sounds really surprising, I think, if somebody meets you. All right. So you
Mhm.
entrepreneur, 4 businesses now. I want to go later on. I want to come back to the moment when you dropped out of college because of lack of money and became an entrepreneur soon after that. But let's go back to where you grew up. What were your younger years like?
I grew up in a middle class family. We've always been in business. My mom was in foreign exchange. I have four sisters. It was a comfortable life. And then I think it all like changed when my dad died when I was 11, turning 12. And yeah, so basically everything turned upside down. And ever since then, it's been a series of challenges.
So things were not too difficult when you're younger. And then what changed after your dad died when you were 11 or 12? What made it harder or what changed?
I think part of it is my mom was just too heartbroken to continue with the business as usual. She lost her partner. And that's especially because it was an accident, right? She never got the chance to prepare for it.
Very sudden.
That's it. One day you just realize you've got four girls who are still in school to raise by yourself.
Wow.
So yeah.
Okay. And then so what got your mom, super difficult situation for her? I'm imagining that's also you guys lost your dad and then your mom, you're watching her struggle, losing her partner. And then so what did that kind of lead to as far as changes in your life?
It really felt like losing both parents at that point.
Mm.
I think my sisters and I, we tried to cope the best way we can because we didn't have that glue anymore, right? I felt very much alone. And so after that, it was just me for myself from that point on.
So you
Yeah.
felt a lot more alone after that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just the situation really. I remember even something like it was my first time to study in the city, right? That school year after my dad died. And my mom totally forgot about me. So after school, I had to figure out by myself, like how to go home.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's just like an example. Like after that, it's like a lot of even those small things I had to deal with myself. Yeah.
Can you go back to those times and remember what you were feeling other than loneliness? Can you remember being that version of Chrystal?
Yeah, there was a lot of resentment as well. Yeah, like that normal life
Mm.
again. There was also being scared. It's really like loneliness, just searching for love in the wrong
Lost,
places. And yeah, just
kind of like
lost, I think,
aim.
in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
directionless or, yeah. Okay. And
It
then,
feels like you're just trying to go through days really without
yeah.
knowing how. Yeah.
So a little bit directionless or lost and aimless or, yeah, just maybe emptiness or,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I got into a relationship, an healthy one, very early on. And
yeah.
it was with a
Yeah.
boy who
Tell
was,
us about how that started.
again, after I lost my dad, and we were very close. We start, and then I felt like I lost my mom. You look for love at the wrong places
Mm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And yes, and that's how like it started. I found it in this boy who was into drugs, who was not very good with school and all that.
You
And
guys met in school?
yeah, and no, he was actually a neighbor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
And that's how I became a teenage mom. I had my first child just as I turned 17.
okay.
Yeah.
Similar with Gladys, she had her first at 16. So that's why you look so young. And
Yeah.
then were you in that relationship for a long time?
I was in a relationship, I think, for like over 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. That's so long. Yeah.
Right. And so then
Well, I think, and then
how did it, yeah.
having a child forces you to think about the future, right? So when I was aimless, it was easier to make bad decisions. When you're not afraid of the consequences, it's so much easier to make bad decisions. So at that point, it sunk in. I'm responsible for this human being now, and I have to make better choices. Yeah, that
what do
was
you
that.
what do you remember being the hardest parts of those years when you were early in that relationship with
Well,
mom?
what was funny is that people think about being a mom so young as like a really bad thing. But for me, it was a huge blessing. And I remember we had this conversation, right? It's being contented is not a good thing. I was at that point where I was just like, okay, like I'm in this relationship, I'm able to eat, I'm okay with this kind of life, right? But being a mom made me want better things. So it was a huge blessing for me. And I think also because I am very maternal, I really enjoyed motherhood.
Nice.
Even though I was very young, I embraced it. I was very excited about it. I remember I had this scrapbook and I have notes about choking and things to do, the milestones to expect. And I was 16 years old, pregnant, and just very excited about it, actually. Yeah.
That's really cool that you saw it as a gift from the very beginning and leaned into it and loved it. You
Mhm.
mentioned how other people see that as a bad thing. And
Yeah.
obviously it has its pros and its cons, and we're not advocating it necessarily, but did you have a challenge at all dealing with the opinions of other people, like the judgment that sometimes you get in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one very memorable. Like this experience really stuck to me. After I had my first child, I received a letter from my Lola who lives in Manila. So imagine it's snail mailed and I get this letter. I'm very excited. And one word that she used was sayang, which means what a waste. And I remember thinking like you use that word when you talk about spoiled food
Right.
or stuff like that. I don't feel
Something
like a spoiled
lost.
food. And like, and like, in fact, I was like more motivated than I ever was. And then there were also these people who I felt like who really wanted, especially like in a very Catholic country, right? There's an expectation when you do something like bad, like being pregnant very early, they want something bad to happen to you because that seems to be the logic, right? You do something bad, bad things happen, right? And I thought there were people who really wanted that to happen to me. And I think I was just lucky because I met the right people at the right time. And I remembered there was this person, and I'm not going to name this person, but I was talking about my boys, right? And I was using this tool and I was just like, yeah, I've got kids and I made mistakes early, was what I said. And then he wasn't very happy about that. He said, I don't want you like apologizing again for having kids. That really got to me. And I noticed as soon as I changed my tone, when I said, oh, I've got two beautiful boys, instead of saying, yeah, I've got this, being very apologetic about having two boys early,
Right.
the way people interacted with me changed,
You
you
set the
know,
tone.
and yeah. And also, not just the way people interacted with me, but also like how I started to expect people to interact with me. When I started thinking like, I've got nothing to apologize about. Yeah, you set certain standards. You just give off that
Yeah.
a better energy.
Right.
Yeah.
You show up with confidence and like acceptance and
Yeah.
love for yourself in your own life. Other people treat you that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we go back? I'd like to ask your thoughts on going in just a little bit of a layer deeper. You said that people around you, and it's not just about you, but like people in this culture, and I'm sure it's not just this culture, but you feel like when people see someone make a mistake or do something sinful, or
Yeah.
that they're looking for or expecting, I think you even said wanting something bad things to happen. What do you think is the reason for that? Is it because they want to see bad things happen to people, or is it because it's the religious narrative that if we sin, then there's consequences? Or what do you think are the kind of underlying
Yeah.
reasons?
For me, I do think it stems from, religion, which is like very black and white. You do something wrong, you have sins, you go to hell. It's that concept, right?
So looking them, they're probably not conscious about it, but I've seen the same thing. But so people are perhaps unconsciously looking for the punishment. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about because I guess that validates the worldview, right? So if you see negative things happen to someone after they did something that you think is bad, it validates the narrative that consequences come from
Yeah.
bad choices or something like that. But I love your story because it shows a different angle to look at it through. And you didn't let that rule. You didn't let that become your narrative. You said, no, I'm going to choose to love being a mom, and I'm going to choose to be proud of it and do it really well and
Yeah.
show up in a way that other people will treat me the way I treat myself. And so then that view of other people didn't have the same power on you that it ends up having sometimes on other people. Is that fair?
Yeah. That's a great way to describe that. Yeah.
I think that's it's something probably valuable for other people to hear, because I know a lot of people that end up in similar situations, whether it's being a single mom or any other choice in life that other people judge as wrong. And then you end up carrying the guilt that they're pushing onto you if you did. But it's a choice. You don't have to accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it takes, again, I was lucky because I met that person. And that's why when I meet people, I try to be that person for them, especially when I meet someone who seems to be in self doubt. And it's also like a funny occurrence like that. You do notice that people who talk about themselves or to themselves in a negative way, it attracts like negative things. So I want to be that person because I can totally relate. That was me. I do know that one of the things also that I did much later on after I got employed and I was paid well, I got to move out of the house and that helped even more. And I remember you told me this, there are all these voices in our heads, whether it's our family, and it's so great to be free from that, right? But I do know that not all people are able to do that right away. For me, start with your tone, like the way you think about yourself, the way you talk about yourself to other people, and the way you talk to yourself.
So when
Yeah,
you say
that's
tone, you're
right there.
talking about like the inner narrative, the things you're saying to yourself about yourself.
Yes,
That
yes. Be
nice.
very self-conscious about it. It takes discipline. It's not
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
Having that awareness. Yeah. I remember when I first started paying attention to the dialogue in my own head, that monologue, that inner narrative that's just running all the time, and so easy to, I think what many of us are just going through life, not aware of it. We're not listening to it, not paying
Yeah.
attention. But when you really tune in, you're like, wait a minute, is that how I want to talk to myself? Is that going to make me show up as who I want to be? So
Yeah.
totally agree. I love it that you've set the intention to be that person for other people when you hear them in self-doubt, that you want to help them shift that inner narrative. You said you've been lucky and that you've met people at the right times that helped you shift that way that you were looking at yourself.
Yeah.
And you said that it was luck. If you could give people some guideline, how can they increase the chances of, who do you look for? How do you attract people in your life that will support you in that way, or that might be able to help you move toward who you want to become?
I think it's a decision you make too, right? I used to have so many friends, especially when you're young. You tend to have all these friends. Not all of them are good for you. You should start thinking about that. Am I with people who are good for me, healthy for me? So I think I made a conscious decision. I trimmed down my friends and then also putting myself in places where I will meet
I
these people who are
love,
positive and
I
yeah.
love that advice. I love that choice that you made to be intentional about who you're surrounding yourself with. I'd love to get a little more specific if possible. Like, who do you, as you've been intentional looking for who you want to surround yourself with, what are some of the things you look for in people?
One of the things I noticed that attract me to certain people is being positive. I have this hype man. If I surround myself with these hype men, if I'm down, if I'm like taking on like a project and I'm worried about it, I can always count on my friends to like tell me, you can do it. You can give me like positive advice and all that. So I look for positivity.
People that lift
And
you.
yeah, yeah. I think for me, that's the most important part, having that
Yeah.
positivity around you.
Yeah, that's a really key one. If you find yourself after spending time with someone that you're more critical or you're just negative, like if people are complaining or pointing out all the things that are negative, I know that's been actually a big challenge for me, is to be someone who brings that kind of energy to other people, because I tend to be not, I don't think I'm consciously complaining, but I tend to notice the flaws in things because I want to improve them. So I'm like, this needs to get better here. And I'm always, my tendency is to talk about the things that need to be
Oh,
improved
there's things that need to be improved. Yeah.
rather than the things I appreciate. It's been a very
Yeah.
conscious challenge for me to be that person for other people, to actually make them so that when people leave being around me, that they actually feel recharged instead of, oh my God, there's so many problems. All right. So you said that you've put yourself in places where you're more likely to meet those kind of people. Like, do you have any tips on that? What kind of places are you referring to?
So like business events, or like, for example, I have this entrepreneur friend and, she'd invite me to events. And normally I would say no, because I'm very much an introvert and very awkward socially. But I force myself to be at these events because I know I will meet quality people. And it's the same thing with you. I remember when I first met you, I was literally like shaking because it was so uncomfortable for me. But I know I'm with a person who helped me like improve my life. Yeah. And I remember when you gave me like invitations to meet your friends. And again, like those were very uncomfortable for me. But I made sure to say yes and show up, even if I needed some beers to help. Yeah. Yeah.
I very much respect that you have done those scary things like meeting new people. And I remember the first time we met, the conversation was really good. And yeah, it's so nice when you end up with a really good relationship that came from doing something scary, like meeting somebody for coffee, even when you're scared of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Awesome. Thank you for sharing those things. So I guess going back to, curious about the period of time when you dropped out of college. So how old were you then?
So I was probably 17 when I finally just made a decision that I'm not going to
So
continue
this is
anymore. I can't continue anymore.
okay. So you had one of your sons then, probably
I
already
already
had
had
both.
two.
Okay.
Yeah. So that must be 18.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I had my second one at 18.
And then, so a lot of people, the reason I want to zero in on that is because a lot of people, you started out your adult life with two, on paper, two big disadvantages, two things that many people would say, oh my God, I'm basically handicapped in life. Like I'm at such a disadvantage that I'm a single mom. And so two kids, and then I didn't finish school. Many people would just automatically feel like and there's a lot of can't happening in their head. I can't this, I can't this, I can't this. But look at everything you
Yeah.
did. So I'm really curious to hear, how did you go from those disadvantages to being this amazing woman amazing mom and entrepreneur? What were some of the
Mhm.
first things you did? I guess I'd love to hear first, what were you feeling when you were forced to drop out of college because of lack of funding?
That was probably one of the biggest heartbreaks of my life because I was very much into school. I loved school. I enjoy the exams. I enjoy the challenge. I love meeting people. Yeah, that was really heartbreaking. And I also was when my dad was very much into graduate college, get a good job. He was that type of man. So I felt like I was failing him. So it was very heartbreaking. But at the same time, I just knew that I needed to I the thing is that like I didn't have the choice, right? So I needed to find money and then do something to provide for my family. Yeah, just determined as well to move forward.
So what did you do first?
So I always wanted to be a writer, right? When I was in college, my part-time job was writing SEO content. At some point when I was 17, my friend who was an IT person connected me to someone from New York who was hiring freelance writers. And I was getting paid, I remember, $5 per page, right? And so I realized, oh, I can pay other people to write for me and then, yeah, make more money. And so that's how it started. So it was just this one client who gave me a chance. And then I hired students to write for me. Well, what's funny actually is that I was very much aware that I was very young. I would have been like a very young boss. So I used a fake name. And, so every time like I would interview these candidates, they would think they were talking to this American who's in New York, but they didn't know.
You were interviewing people on like video calls or what?
No, it was just chat that time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
gonna say. Okay. Crazy. So quite entrepreneurial. And freelancing was not super popular back then. That was
Yeah.
what year-ish?
That was 2007,
Okay.
2008.
Yeah. So freelancing is common now, but back then definitely not. So you're doing that right out of college or dropping out of college and running your own business, SEO business. So then what happened?
Yeah.
What were some of the
So
challenges? What were some of the challenges went wrong in that? What did you learn?
what wrong? Nothing really. It was going really well. And then it just happened that I had my articles online and I met this person who was in advertising looking for a freelance writer. And I was given the opportunity to write for them. And then later on, this person reaches out and said, we're planning to have open a branch there in the Philippines. Would you be interested to join us as one of the founders? And the pay was very appealing. So I went for it. Yeah. And also, here was one of what made me like quit that work. So with SEO, I really felt like there was no need for editorial. Before, it was more about adding keywords,
Just keywords, not about
yeah,
quality.
yes, that's right. So I didn't feel like I was getting any better as a writer.
Yeah.
So when I was given that opportunity to join the healthcare advertising agency, that was the most appealing part for me. The fact that I know that somebody is going to look at my work and tell me how I can improve. And yeah, so good.
So you primarily, or one of the main reasons that you jumped into that opportunity was because you saw the chance to get better, to grow.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel along this journey when you get opportunities or when there's this potential to do a big leap, to jump up or to go way outside your competency, did you feel worried that you wouldn't be good enough or any kind of doubt in yourself? Or just always had a belief
Well,
that you could do it?
I always found that it's that period before saying yes that's the hardest. So I made it a point with every opportunity, every like invitation to do something. I like to say yes first because to me that's the hardest part, and then try to figure out how
Figure it out
to.
later.
Yeah. So one thing that I always knew was that I'm not afraid to work hard. I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the sharpest tool in the box, but I can outwork anyone. I'm not afraid to work hard. Especially like when I got into the healthcare advertising industry, I was working with doctors, I was working with nurses. I remember the first time you went through a clinical trial, and I'm just like, oh my God, what are they talking about? But because I did not have that college background, I spent more time like going through things, checking the dictionary every after few words and on. Yeah.
So you've done a lot of
It's-
self-teaching along the way?
Yeah. It's just a confidence that I think with anything, you can work hard enough to get better at it.
So you
Yeah.
can improve, you can take ownership of the learning along the way. Is there, right before saying yes, because a lot of people don't have that, I don't know, it's like when you're faced with a choice to do something scary that you're not comfortable or competent, like you just don't think you can, I don't know anything about that, why am I getting this opportunity? And then all these doubts can pop in. So it's like the what ifs, right? What if this happens? What if that?
Yeah.
And then the fear starts to build. And that can really block people from having the guts to just say yes and figure it out. But do you remember any narratives or any little word, phrases that you've used with yourself just to convince yourself to say yes first?
Let me see. I think
Maybe one of them is the working hard thing. I know I can work
yeah,
hard.
yeah. I can outwork anyone was what I always said to myself. I'm not afraid to work all night. I'm not afraid to look stupid. I think that's
Nice.
also like
Nice.
one very important thing,
It
right?
is.
I'm okay with looking like an idiot in the beginning. There's also that, but also I think the awareness again that right now I'm saying these things to myself. I'm saying these what ifs. I'm saying and that it's normal. And the thing is that what it's normal to, but it's usually rewarding is what like I noticed with these kinds of things, right? Like change is scary. Success is scary. It may not make sense, but yeah, it's just being
Nice.
aware of that.
Love it. So you're telling yourself, I can work hard. I'm totally willing to look stupid in the beginning. And because I'm willing to look stupid and work hard, I'll figure it out. Like I can learn anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, and obviously that's worked because you've done it over and over again. And you don't even consider yourself necessarily ultra brilliant. So you're not saying I'm super intelligent. You're just like, I can learn
Yeah.
and I'll
Not
do
at
the work.
all.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You've given us some really good parts of your story. I think there's tons in your experience that other people could learn from, probably entrepreneurial, being a mom, learning to live alone and be single, and relationships. Like I know you have a lot you've learned. So I've seen you as a leader in the company that I know you've had for a long time, the marketing agency. What are some of the things that you've coming into business so young? Did you have challenges in learning how to lead? Like, what are some of the things that you found most challenging learning how to be an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I think I was in a leadership role very young and I was very uncomfortable. Some people were uncomfortable too about reporting to someone younger than them who hasn't finished college. So
Did you have
yeah,
evidence of that, or was that were you afraid of that, or did you really have evidence that people felt that way?
I just had one instance, but this was before I took on a leadership role. And there was this one person who just said, you're all very lucky. You should know how lucky you are to get this job, especially those who haven't finished college. So I knew like it was an issue, right? That some people were not uncomfortable about me being there. Because I looked around and I'm just like, I'm the only one in the room who hasn't finished college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you're in this leadership role and you're feeling maybe a little bit insecure because you perceive that matters, that you didn't, that
Yeah.
they graduated and you didn't. And so how was that challenge?
I think like later on, when people see your intentions and you're not, what you call that? I think it's also about management style, right? If I was the type of person who was controlling and I think people saw my intentions that I just wanted to create good stuff. I just wanted to better the company. This is not like a personal thing. It's not about power. It's not about control. And I think later on after that, people started to just work with me. I also don't think about the funny thing about titles, right? I don't think about titles very much. I don't think about it as a hierarchy thing. It's more about roles. It's like you could be the best at your job, but not take on a management role because those two require very different skill
Yeah.
sets. So yeah, so I think it reflected in the way I dealt with people. I never felt I was above them and they were beneath me. And yeah, I think that was important.
Can you think of one of the more worst struggles, challenges, or moments in leadership for you?
What was that? The hardest part for me is always having to keep a brave face when things are not going well. The balancing between keeping a brave face, but also being transparent, right? You don't want to lie about the state of the company,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you don't want them demotivated. You still want them to believe that things can get better. And being very aware that people get energy from you. Yeah. And I think that to me must be the hardest part because the entrepreneurial journey is full of that. It's never like a straight line. And I think even if whether you're running a business for whether it's a startup, whether it's 10 years, there will always be challenges and you'll always be required to keep that balance. Yeah.
The fact that other people on your team get energy from you is so true. And it's very easy to undervalue that or not put enough priority on it. We get very caught up in all the things we think we need to do, like all the things we think we need to accomplish. But we forget that the energy that we're bringing to the rest of the team is like
Yeah.
critical. If that's not there, then nothing else you do,
Yeah.
everything else you do might be worthless if you're bringing people down.
Yeah. But it's also hard because sometimes you're not in a good state yourself,
Exactly. So what do you
right?
do? So as a leader, then knowing that, also knowing that you said you want to be the kind of person that brings other people up and you want to be able to bring good energy to other people. What are some of the things that you do to change your energy state when you're down?
I don't really know. I just show up. You just show up and you just smile, put on that brave face. Yeah.
Okay.
But also, I think it helps that I do genuinely believe in the business and I do genuinely believe in the people I work with. I think,
Okay. Yeah, belief is key.
yeah.
How do you keep that
Now,
belief strong? What do you
I
focus on?
don't know. I don't even know. I think 'cause I've just been working with the same people for years and years, and I just know them. And yeah, so I believe in everybody.
Do you think that other people around us feeling that we believe in them makes so much of a difference in how they actually end up working? Like
Yeah,
it makes such a big difference. So that's probably why you've been working with them
absolutely.
for so long, is that you've actually been believing in them. You think it's that you believe in them because they've been good for so long, but I think it's they've been good for so long because you believed in them. Think
Oh,
about it.
yeah.
It's
True.
a
Ah.
it's a positively reinforcing cycle. Chrystal, thank you for all your sharing so far today. Would you say there's any other key parts of your life that you wanted to share today that we haven't covered?
I think that was really like the hardest part of it. I think we pretty much covered everything from losing my dad, being a very young mom, my first entrepreneurial journey, and
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I can't.
All right. So I like to wrap up with a couple of questions that I usually ask everybody. If you think about who you are right now, and then let's say go back 3 to 5 years, what are a few of the things that you're really proud of that are different? Like what's Chrystal today versus a couple of years back? What growth have you seen in yourself?
First of all, with work, right? My ability to pivot and embark on something new things after to jump from one failure and then to start something new again. And yeah,
So
to
the
take
speed
on
of
something
resiliency,
new.
something like that,
How
or
would you
just
call that?
being able to pivot and shift directions, let go of.
Yes, because it's easy to lose confidence and then just stop and then I'll be an employee and never take on anything again. It's easy to fall into that. So yeah, so in terms of work, there's that. And also like always bravely following my passions and believing and only working on things that I believe in, being selective. And I think that's definitely one thing I'm proud of. And as a mom, I raised two good children. And initially, like before, I was very self-conscious about they don't have a father, I might be like a failure and all that. And I just remember like having this conversation with my kids. I said, I feel a bit bad because they're not like normal kids. They wear my jewelry. They're very hygienic. All things that come with like, obviously you've been raised by a mom. And I was very self-conscious of that. And I told them, I said, I wish you had more of a male influence, that you may have been different. You may have been more normal. They were just like, no, they were very comfortable in the way they were. And I think that's my biggest accomplishment, that I've raised people who are
Comfort,
confident in themselves. Yeah. Comfortable
comfortable
in
with who they are.
who they
That's
are.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So important.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Last question I would love to ask is, what's a resource that you go to when you want to learn something? You could recommend a book, you could recommend a YouTube channel, just like what's a go-to source for your learning? making
My
Yeah.
Kindle is, yeah, definitely. But I just have this bad habit of reading things and then not finishing them. But yeah, it's
Can you
my,
think of something you read on Kindle? So a book that's been, even if you didn't finish it, that's been powerful
yeah.
for you?
One thing that really stuck to me was the book you recommended by Adam Grant about rewiring your brain. And I think that's so powerful. Thinking about that, right? It's the reason why I've started becoming even more confident to meet people, right? Because you always have this mindset, right? Like you're socially awkward, never mind meeting people, stick with a job or a role where you don't have to meet people, right? But instead of limiting myself, I had the idea, which you shared with me, that we can rewire our brain. Start with thinking what you want and not thinking about what I can't do because. So, yeah.
Just seeing ourselves as changeable and that we can learn anything and really reprogram. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Nice.
can't tell you how many times I've shared that to so many people. Stop thinking that way. You can rewire your brain. You can do this. Just expose yourself enough to uncomfortable situations and your brain will adapt.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to get your feedback on the book that I've been writing for a while now that's almost done. That's really about that topic. It's called
Share it with me.
Scary
Yeah.
Equals Happy. And you mentioned a
I'd
bunch of
love to
things
read
today, like
that.
doing scary things. You said something earlier about how you started deciding that not only would you say yes whenever some opportunity came your way that you were afraid of, but that you would try to connect. I'm changing the words here, but that you would try to connect.
Mhm.
Remember that when you do those scary things, that you usually feel really good on the other side of it, right? That there's
Yeah.
this positive outcome. And
Yeah.
for me, that's a theme of listening to your stories, is that you seem like you're really good at remembering that, yes, okay, this fear, and it's normal whenever there's this opportunity in front of me that I'm scared of. I know it's normal to be afraid, but I also just have this policy of saying, I can figure it out. I'll work, I'll learn.
Yeah.
And on the other side is this great feeling of growth, something like that.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you, Chrystal, for being who you are, and just grateful to know you.
Aw,
And thanks for taking the time to share these parts of your story here.
my pleasure. And yeah, and I'm grateful to be able to do this with you and tell the world how you've been very helpful to who I have become and everything I've achieved. I met you at a time when I was very, what you call it, I was hungry for learning, and you really helped get me uncomfortable. And yeah,
I think there's a lot of people out there at any given moment who are in that period of their lives, like where they're thinking about they want to change, they want to grow. And that's what this channel, that's what we're doing this for, is to try to help those people realize they're not alone and hear stories of other people. Awesome. All right. Thank you again.
all
Talk to you very
right.
soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview on Emerge Stories. We really hope that something here sparked your curiosity, or maybe helped you think about something in your life just from a little bit of a different angle or perspective, maybe opened up your mind to something you might be able to do in your life to take more ownership of your own learning and growth. That's the goal of this show. So please join our community, like and share, and tell other people about these stories if they're meaningful for you. And thanks so much for being here.